Faith chapter in Hebrews is often called the Hall of Heroes. Why heroes, right? I'd say on a regular basis, I don't know how often, but my boys and I will sit around and the topic will come up, who's the best superhero? You know, and we will then negotiate and wager and debate who has the greatest abilities over fictional characters that have no say or actually no impact on our world whatsoever, except to dream about them. But I'll say this is what's amazing about it. Here in the Bible, we have a list of heroes, and they're heroes because of their faith. But they're heroes, why? Do you understand that just because we uplift them and we look at them and we admire them does not mean that they did not have problems? Said by faith Abraham, if you'll notice, who when he was called to do what? Take his son to the altar and then to sacrifice him on that altar. Okay, it's one thing to say, okay, well, what does it matter? Because it's just your son and God can do anything. Are you aware what God is asking of Abraham? He's asking this father to take a child whom he loves dearly to kill him. God lays it out before Abraham. Take Isaac and go up to the mountain and sacrifice unto me. You want me to lay my son out? The one that you promised? Yes, I do. Do you think it's difficult for Abraham when he's at home at 70 years of age in the Ur of the Chaldees with his mom and his dad and his brothers and sisters and all of his known family? It's where he grew up, and the love of his life, Sarah, right there at his side, and they're content. They're well off. They don't have any really major needs. They're not hurting financially, and yet God comes to you and says, Abraham, follow me. Come out from among them and go to a place that I tell you about. Where at, God? A place you've never been before. Well, God, how are we going to get there? Don't worry about that. Are you going to follow me or not? I want you to leave everybody behind. Don't take anybody with you, and I want you to come after me. Do you think that was an easy decision for Abraham? But so often we look at it in the narrative of the story and we just read it like it's another blip along the next page we're reading, the next chapter we got going on, and we just kind of go on and keep reading as if it doesn't really matter. But do you not understand that Abraham had to make a very difficult decision? Am I going to follow God or am I going to stay? He then gets up and travels to a land that he had never been before. He just knows God's going to keep leading me. Is this the place, God? No, keep going. He then gets to a mountain later and he says, okay, God leads him up to a mountain and says, I want you to look to the north, look to the east, look to the west, look to the south. All the land that you can see, it's yours. I give to you and all your inheritance. So this is it. Okay, God, thank you. But see, that's a great reward for following his faithfulness. But Abraham didn't know that when he was going through it. Do you think it was easy for Abraham to know that God had given him that land and then he has to leave that land and go down, sojourn down in Egypt? He has to go to other people because he needs food or famine, whatever it may be. And he does all this work and he toils and he labors and he digs wells. And as he digs these wells, some people come by and fill them in. All that work, all that effort spent. Anyways, he watches his son, his nephew go off to the land of Sodom and Gomorrah, and his whole family gets destroyed except for his 2 daughters. Do you think Abraham had an easy life? Do you think it was hard for Abraham? Hey, go ahead and I'll let you respond. Did Abraham have a difficult life? It seems like up to this point in his life, up until about 70 years of age, we don't know about the struggles of his life. But ever since he decided to follow Christ, do we in the story of Abraham see his struggles? Does he make mistakes along the way? And yet God considers him faithful. Abraham calls him the friend of God. What about Abel? Abel's listed amongst these. Abel being the fourth person ever created. Wants to love God. In fact, loves God and wants to obey God. He's learned from his mom and dad, and he says, I understand mom and dad sinned, and I know I'm a sinner because of my mom and dad. He understood that. He recognized it, and he didn't blame it. He didn't stick his finger in their eyes all day saying, you're the reason we got in this. He obeyed God. And he obeyed God to the degree that he had faith in God. And God says, I accept your offering. And you can get into all the theological discussion behind it, but the fact is Abel loved God and God loved Abel. But it was his faith. I'm offering this out of obedience to you because I know one day, Father, you're going to send a sacrifice that will not just cover my sin today, but will cover my sin for all of eternity. Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. You think it was easy in his life, a man who loved God? Did you know that Enoch grew up in a world that hated God? And yet all those around him, his neighbors hating God and everybody else, but Enoch purposed in his heart, I'm going to walk with Him, the one who created me. I'm going to get to know Him, and I'm going to see what this life really is meant to all be about. You think it was easy for Noah, who for 120 years was the laughing stock of all his community and his brethren and his family? Can I ask you a question? Did Noah have brothers? The answer is yes. Did he have sisters? Probably. Did he have parents? Yes. When the rains came, where were they? Where were Noah's nephews and nieces? You think it was easy for Noah to listen to the mockery and the lack of their faith? Oh, Noah, it's all right. That's just the way people treat about you. But Noah's trying to convince his family. He's like, you need to get on the ark. You need to get on the ark. I'm not wasting my time for nothing. God said He's sending the rain. Wait, you really believe that? Yes, I believe it. I believe it wholeheartedly, or I wouldn't be doing this. As he pleads with his family to get saved, what do? 8 people get on the boat. And we think it was just a joyride. You think Noah sat there and laughed? Ha ha, you bunch of suckers. I believe he wept. And he wept and wept, knowing that he did all he could to save their souls. And this just goes to prove it doesn't matter how much I care, they have to choose salvation. As much as I want you to be saved, as much as I want the lost to save, as much as I want my next door neighbor saved, as much as I want my coworkers to accept Christ as their Savior, I can plead with them and I can beg them. And I can do all that I can to warn them and I can point them in a direction, but I can't force them to put their faith in God. Do you think Sarah struggled the mockery of other mothers around her? As she was told she's going to give birth a son, and it's been, we were told that when I was 70, and now I'm pushing like, I'm 80 now. I'm like 70, I'm 77 now, and God still hasn't given me an heir. Go ahead and take my Hagar, my wife, and have a son with her. Imagine the strife that was created in their family because of it. A whole lot. What about Isaac? What about Jacob? You want to talk about a man who suffered a lot. His name was Jacob. His life started out, he was deceiving everybody. He tried to lie. Remember how he deceived his dad? He pretended to be somebody he wasn't. He wasn't honest with his father, and then he goes running. And then he has to confront his father. And then he tells his father, okay, the father gives him advice and says, you need to go back to Uncle Laban's house. Then as he leaves from God, from his house, and he will never see his mother again, just so you know. You understand, Isaac marries Rebekah. You understand, she dies before Jacob comes back home. And the last interaction with his mom and Jacob was his mom helped him deceive their father. He then flees, and he flees to a place called Beth. It was just a place at the time, they call it Jacob's Ladder, where he had a meeting with God, so to speak, and he saw Jacob's Ladder as we know it as Christianity. His pillow was some stones. He was sleeping on a stone out in the middle of the desert. And you say, well, that was probably peaceful. He was running for his life. Esau wanted to kill him. He then gets lied to by his future father-in-law. He's mistreated by his father-in-law, and he's worked 21 years of his life as given to his father-in-law for a wife that he was supposed to have the first time. He ends up working 14 years to get his second wife. Do you think Jacob had some problems? When Jacob was an old man, he was like 120 years of age, and he's standing before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asks Jacob about his life, and he says, the years of thy life of thy servant have been, and I think he says difficult and hard. You got to understand, his favorite son Joseph, he believed for almost, 13 years, he believed his son to be dead. He buries his wife Leah, and he buries Rachel, and he buries his cherished son, and now he's got to live. He's like, I'm going to mourn the rest of my life until I die and wither up an old man. Was this man, did he face difficulties? He sure did. Did he want to give up? Did he want to run away? I'm sure he did. But guess what? His faith overcame his fear. What about Joseph after being sold into slavery for 13 years and then not being able to return? Joseph would spend the rest of his life, from the time he was 17 to the moment he took his last breath, Joseph would spend it in a foreign land called Egypt, never to return back home. It says even when they went to go get Isaac and bring all the stuff back, he didn't see Joseph. Joseph had work to do there in Egypt, so he sent the wagons to go pick up his dad and bring him back to Egypt. Did Moses, as we read a few moments ago, did Moses have faced difficulties? Was Moses faced? Well, you said he was raised in Pharaoh's house. He had a silver spoon in his mouth. He had everything he could ever want. Let me ask you a question. Did Moses face hardship? You understand he was born a slave? He was born a slave who was then raised that slave was raised in Pharaoh's house as one of his own. And then of his own free accord, he chooses to he could have enjoyed the pleasures of his life. He could have enjoyed the riches. He could have enjoyed all the things of life that other people don't have to struggle with and worry about. He could have ignored all those struggles and he could have had a peaceful, cushy life. But what did Moses choose rather? He saw his people suffering and struggling and facing the toil every single day. They'd wake up and they'd be slaves and they'd be in punishment. And he chose to leave the kingdom behind and become a slave. What person in their right mind would choose difficulty and slavery and oppression over the pleasures of this world? Moses did. Then Moses, knowing what he gave up to suffer with his people, some of his fellow Israelites, they're fighting amongst themselves and they get whipped with an Egyptian. And the Egyptian takes that man and he kills him and says, "Don't hurt my people." The very next day he sees two of his Israelite buddies fighting and arguing, and he goes to break them up and he stands up between them. Hey, y'all knock it off now. Y'all shouldn't be fighting like this. Y'all are brethren. And he says, "Are you going to kill us like you did the Egyptian?" Then he runs terrified, knowing that Pharaoh's out to murder him now. Then for 40 years, do you know where Moses is at? The backside of a desert, all by himself with a bunch of sheep. You think he was lonely? You think he faced depression? You think he faced hardship? Do you think he felt all alone? He certainly did. But this was a man of faith. By faith, they passed through the waters, through the Red Sea as by on dry ground, which the Egyptians, essaying to do, were drowned. That by faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days. And what shall I say more? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, of Barak, and of Samson, and of Jephthah, and of David also, and of Samuel, and of the prophets who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in the fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women who received their dead back to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others also trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover of bonds and imprisonments. They were stoned and they were sawn asunder. They were tempted, they were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in the dens and in the caves of the earth. Let me ask you a question. These are the people who love God. These are the people who believe God. These are the people who rest everything, all their hope, all their dreams, all their ambitions are in God. And it sounds like to me their life is difficult. What do you think? Did it sound difficult to you? Must I be carried to the skies on flowery beds of ease while others fight to win the prize and sail through bloody seas? Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. So God has prepared a table, has He not? But He puts someone in the company. It's amazing. This morning we were talking about it in the car on the way here. Like, who would you want to meet in history? And it's like, who would you not want to meet in history, you know? And then one of the, we talk about people, it might be, oh man, I don't want to meet with that person, or I do. I don't get to choose how tall I am. I don't get to choose what color my hair is or the amount of hair. I don't get to choose who my parents are. I don't get to choose what I look like. Now, I can choose how much of me you get to see, because the more I eat, the more you get to see of me, There's some things in life that I have no control over. Am I just so lucky enough that I deserved to be born in America? Not just born in America, but born in America in this year and in this day and age. I wasn't born during the Depression. I wasn't born in the middle of World War II happening, where I'm 18, 19 years of age, having to go off to war to fight against an evil that could take over this whole world. Instead, I was born in America, in a land where I've enjoyed pleasure. I've enjoyed full shelves. I remember one time we had a missionary from the Philippines come by. He was a national there. He came to our area, and he was staying for a while to do some just visiting America, getting to know the college, getting to know the churches and stuff. And he was going to go back. Well, he was amazed. He was sitting at our house, and he was eating, because they were coming through with some people there at the house. And he said, one of the things that amazes me so much is coming here is that you walk down the aisle and there's just food everywhere. You can go to like 7 different stores in your town alone, and it's just packed full of food. Food, top shelf to bottom shelf, layered deep, and it's just everywhere. He goes, it's crazy to me. I remember in Jess, somebody was trying to explain to him about the texture ceiling on ceilings. Oh, they call it popcorn texture or whatever. And he thought in his mind that, man, y'all got food so plenty, you are putting it on the ceiling. This is the life that God has given me. And I get to sit, and I don't get to choose what God puts on my plate. Rather have a T-bone steak, medium well, some green beans, mashed potatoes, and some brown gravy maybe. Nice hot dinner roll. But what if God decides to put something on my plate that I don't like? Something that stinks. What if it's moldy cheese that I forgot about? It's been in the fridge for about 3 months and I just found it. What am I going to say to God? God, you gave me what? God, come on, don't you think I deserve better? I can't live off of this. God set the table. There's a lot of potential. You know, a lot could be put on that plate. You know what? Why would God give me more if I don't do anything with what He's already given me? I scarf my food down. All right, I want some more. Can I have some more? More. Or do I look at the person sitting next to me and thinking, oh, wow, they don't have any here. I'll share mine with you. You don't get to determine what God decides to feed you with. He might feed you in ryegrass. He might feed you in clover. He might feed you in bahia or whatever, all the different varieties of grass that there are. But the point is, when God provides you something, are you going to look at Him and say, God, thank you for what you've given me? You know what Job did? Job took everything that God gave him and said, thank you for everything. When God gave him 1,000 camels or whatever it was, Job was thankful for each and every camel. When God gave him servants, he was thankful for each servant. When God gave him a child, he wasn't thankful for just that one child. He was thankful for all 10 children. When God gave him a wife, he was thankful for that wife. When God gave him blessing upon blessing, Job was thankful to God for it. Josh, how do you know that? Because when God took it all away, what's Job's response? Does he sit there and complain and whine and get angry at God? Does he tell God, you're not fair, you're not just, you're not helpful, I stopped believing you? God, I don't believe in you anymore. You're so far from me. You would never let this happen if you were right here with me. But instead, when we strip everything away from Job, everything, when we strip away all the forms of his life, when we strip away all the blessings of his life, when we take all of his Instagram posts away, and now we get to see what the actual person of Job is. Now, Job, let's get to know you. Now the rubber meets the road. We actually get to find out what kind of man you really are. The whole world, for the rest of all of eternity of humankind, are going to talk about you, Job. We're going to find out what kind of man you are. You were tested by God, and by Satan comes up and says, well, have you considered my servant Job? Or God says that to Satan, and Satan's like, yeah, but he only loves you. He's only grateful to you only because you bless him. Take it all away and he'll curse you. God takes all of it away, lets Satan take it all away. And Job sits with an empty plate, brokenness, and he says, though you slay me, God, even if you get to the point where you kill me, I will still trust in you. That's faith. That's what it means to work out your own faith by fear and trembling, or that's what it means. It means to live what you believe. Do I believe in righteousness? Then do I live righteously? Do you eat whatever is set before you? Some things are good to look forward to. We save our. I remember there used to be a saying when we have dinner on the grounds. They'd have that saying, "Save your fork, something better's coming." You know. And for life, save your fork too, because you have a lot more coming. It's called heaven. When abandonment comes, will you embrace the struggle? When loneliness comes, will you embrace the struggle? When you fail again and again, like you failed last week, and you failed last month, and you failed 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, and then you failed again last week, are you going to get back up and keep embracing the struggle? When attacks come, are you going to embrace the struggle? When you face loss, will you embrace the struggle? When you face scorn, will you embrace the struggle? When you face hatred by those who were your friends, will you embrace that struggle? When you face destruction, will you embrace the struggle? When you face death, will you embrace the struggle? Decide now to carry on. Embrace Him who is greater than all. An ever-present help in time of trouble. An ever-always consistent, available help in time of trouble. In the day of my trouble, I sought the Lord. Psalm 77:2. In the day of my trouble, I sought the Lord. My soul ran in the night and ceased not. My soul refused to be comforted. Psalm 86:7. In the day of my trouble, I will call upon Thee, for Thou wilt answer me. For Thou art great and doest wondrous things. Thou art God alone. What are you going to do? Many times, more than I can count, I have wanted to quit. I've lost count of how many times I have had the desire to give up. I've had the desire to run away. I've had the desire to go and hide from everything else, try to hide from my responsibilities in life. I've had every single one of those desires. For a long time in my life, it was just a daily nag on my life that I wanted to quit, give up, and run away. But instead, I continued in the presence of Christ. I found the strength that I needed. to get back up and carry on. A lot of good it does without a chair, right? You know, there have been many times in my life I've sat at the table of my life and I have tried to please this person right here. His name's God. And more often than not, I embarrass him. More often, I have disobeyed him and spit in his face. The very one who's provided me this meal, this wonderful arrangement. And here's what's crazy about God. And I don't try to look down on God. That's not my implication here. What I'm trying to say is He desires to have fellowship with me. And the times in my life where I have felt empty and I have felt all alone, it's not because God cannot provide. It's because He's literally sitting right there and I refused to ask Him for help. You want to stay empty? You wonder why your life is thirsty? Why you've tried everything? You've sampled the buffet of life and you've come up empty every single time. You've had everything that the world had to offer. You've tasted it all. And guess what? When it's all said and done and now you're back at your table and you've come to your awareness, you feel empty, you feel destitute, you feel alone, you feel like you're in despair, and you feel like nothing of value. Like, what am I living for? And the whole thing, God says, I have come here to give you purpose. I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me, I will give him thirst, and I will quench his thirst. He will never thirst again. Go ahead, keep seeking the world. Seek everything that everybody else seeks after. Go ahead and pursue it. And you're going to have an empty, unfulfilled, discouraged, depressed, horrible life because you don't have any purpose. Or you can go to the very one who gives your life meaning and purpose. And even if He gives me a Lord's Supper serving, that can sustain me. Thou anointest my head with oil. My what? Runneth over. Runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Can God satisfy your soul? Absolutely. Embrace the struggle. Take a bite of the soggy mashed potatoes that are cold and don't just hold them in your mouth. Swallow them and say, God, thank you for that bite. You know what most of us probably would live our life like? If we were at the feeding of the 5,000, we probably would have complained that there was no dipping sauce for the fish. You're not going to char grill it, God? Come on. Bread? Couldn't you give me at least a warm loaf? Why does it got to be this kind of just soft bread or a piece of cracker? We don't want to critique everything that God provides us instead of looking at it and say, God, thank you for giving me anything. I'm here. God has a plan for me and He has provisions. But here's the problem. Instead of me pursuing God, what do? I set a place for something else. I do. God didn't set that plate. God intended to have a relationship with me. But instead, I add something else to it. Because you know what, God, your way kind of works, but I'm gonna have this plan off to the side. You know why, God? Because I might not like where your plan takes me. I'm going to try this whole religious thing for a while, God. But if it don't work out, I'm going to go do my own thing. Here's the problem. Instead of living by faith, we allow our struggle to have place in our life. What do you mean, Josh? Our struggle. We allow the fear that we face to be greater. This fear that I'm facing, I allow it to be greater than the faith in my God. And God, I'm so afraid that if I turn over the whole reins to you, God, I'm afraid that if I give you the spoon and say, okay, God, you feed me. I'm not a baby, God, I can feed myself. And He looks at me and goes, yeah, you're my child. You can keep saying that you're not, but you are, and I can feed you, and I can do a lot better job at it than you can. But go ahead, get it all over yourself. Wear it on your head and on your belly and on all over the floors and inside your diaper. That's fine, Josh, go ahead. Or I can say, God, I'll let you feed me, and I'll be grateful for whatever you give me. But because I'm afraid to let God do that, I still let my fear feed me instead of my faith in Him. And that knowing that the time, I'm almost done, folks. I understand the time. I'll stop here. And that knowing the time, that now is high time to awake out of sleep. For now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. The night is far spent. The day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness and let us put on the armor of light. Let us walk honestly. You hear this? Listen to these words. This is Romans chapter 13. Listen to it. Let us walk honestly as in the day, not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and in envy, but put ye on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill their lust thereof. Never give up. Let your faith be bigger than your fear. Thou therefore go embrace the struggle. Realize that some things in your life are going to be difficult. Yes, and embrace it. Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. So here's my point. Stop making provision for fear. Trust God, be thankful unto Him, and don't quit. But you don't know how hard living this Christian life is. You don't know how hard. You don't know what it's like to go through my shoes. You don't know what's happening in my heart. You're right, I don't, but God does. I can tell you, putting your faith in Him is far more rewarding than giving in to your fears. What will my friends say? Well, what will my coworkers say? Well, what will my family say? Stop giving in to fear. Walk honestly before men and do what? Endure hardness. Embrace it. Life is full of struggle. Why? So we can increase our faith in Him. Are you going to embrace difficulty, or are you going to run away from it? Are you preparing to fail, or are you preparing to succeed? Stop setting a place for quitting on the table. Every head bowed, every eye closed.